Well, this is going to pick it up from where I left off, I believe. And it's actually an addendum, if you would, or an addition to what I've done regarding marriage, divorce, and remarriage. One of the issues that is brought up all the time is that if someone has committed adultery and they get divorced, and they get married again, they're double married. In other words, the adultery is not sufficient grounds for divorce. Therefore, it was a non-biblical divorce. As a matter of fact, if I say what I think is right, according to what I've seen in most fundamental quote-unquote Bible-believing churches, if you get married, you're a man, you get married, or a woman, you get married once, you're to stay with that individual regardless until they die. Well, that's ideal. I realize that God intended that man and woman get together and be together for their life. That I don't dispute that at all. However, there are circumstances which have come up, and God allows for the biblical separation and parting and divorce of those two people, and the two people can get married again, and it is legitimate and it is biblical. Now there are only two stipulations other than death. That's desertion and fornication that are grounds for divorce. Okay, death is actually, that's a drop dead easy issue. But if the two people are still alive, the stipulations surrounding a biblical divorce is abandonment, or what's the other word? And in other words, somebody leaves. The first one, desertion. That's it. And the other one is fornication. Well, we're going to deal with the desertion issue some other time. I'm going to very quickly go through the divorce issue related to fornication. Now, I'm going to start by this. The biblical essence of marriage is flesh joining flesh. The essence of divorce, biblically, is flesh leaving flesh and joining other flesh. Okay, now I'll get started. You got that? That's the biblical essence of marriage and divorce. In the Bible, fornication, as you can see, shows up 39 times in 35 verses in 27 chapters and 16 books. Now, of course, I'm not going to go through every one of these references, but there are some I picked out. But you can see that committing fornication is there. That's doing it. And then there's another one that says commit adultery. That's down here with adultery. Commit adultery. So both of them had that phrase involved in them someplace at some time. But adultery can be committed, I'm going to use the word passive. In other words, you can sit where you're sitting without moving from your spot, without moving a finger at all, and you can think in your heart and lust in your heart after another person, male or female, and you committed adultery in your heart. So the fornication issue that's given in Matthew chapter 19, verse 9, and I say unto you that whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And whoso marrieth her which is put away doth commit adultery. That is a stipulation right there. Fornication. So you got to understand that just because someone, I did it again. Just because someone thinks about another individual inappropriately, and that's, of course, a heart matter, that doesn't give grounds for the divorce. In other words, a guy can't put away his wife just because she thinks about another guy. Now, I would prefer that to be the case, that my wife wouldn't. But if she thought about another, and I'm not stupid enough to think that that has probably not happened sometime in our marriage. However, that doesn't give me a grounds for putting away my wife. Now, if she goes out and acts upon that thought in her heart, then that's grounds for divorce. It's right there. If I put away my wife, except if I put her away and it's not fornication, I've caused her to go out and commit adultery, whether it be physically in her by acting upon the thought, or just staying with the individual and going through the ceremony and everything else. They may not even usually it's consummated, but sometimes they're not consummated. It's just a matter of a fantasy in the individual's mind that they think they need somebody else or want somebody else, and it's just satanic deception. And if you go down the thing here, you got adultery. Let me do this. Adultery is 39 times, 32 verses in 23 chapters. I'll increase the font here and change the font. Okay, it's 29 times. I'll do that. 29 times, 32 verses in 23 chapters and 15 books. And of course, the law says, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." And in Matthew 5:28, it's applied to the heart. "But I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath in his heart committed adultery already with her already in his heart." In other words, in his heart it is as if the thought in the heart had been consummated, had been completed. Matthew 5:32 that follows that. "But I say unto you that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication," not adultery, "causeth her to commit adultery, and whosoever shall marry her that is divorced," that's put away, "committeth adultery." And then, of course, Matthew 19, verse 9. Now, look, I'm not going to dwell on this thing. I think you got an idea of what I'm driving at, but I'm gonna try to nail this down with an example that I thought of while I was dealing with this adultery based upon fornication versus divorce based upon fornication versus just adultery. Okay, in the Bible, I'm going to show you this. A whale is a fish. You may not see the connection, and I may not explain it right, but this is what I see. "For as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Jonah, chapter 1, verse 17. Now the Lord prepared a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish. See Matthew 12:40? In the whale's belly. See that? In the belly of the fish. See that? That matches. So therefore, a whale is a fish, not a mammal. I'm going to try to reconstruct what I was thinking about these two words and the biblical definition. Oh, that's right, getting a biblical definition of a word. Not necessarily exactly matching these things, but fornication and adultery are not the same thing. They are separate. That's the thought I had. Regardless of what the theologians say and the narrow-minded fundamentalists say, fornication and adultery are not, although they can be similar, they're not the same. Fornication requires flesh joining flesh. It could be homosexuality, sodomy, bestiality, incest, all sorts of stuff where there's flesh joining flesh. Adultery is a man and a woman thinking of another man or a woman in the situation. It does not have to be a physical contact and a completion of an act, as I showed you in Matthew up above with regard to the thinking in the heart. Now here I've got a bat is called a mammal, but it's not. Leviticus 11:19, the stork, the heron, after her kind, and the lapwing, and the bat. And you go through that to do that in just a second. Deuteronomy 14:18, and the stork, and the heron, after her kind, and the lapwing, and the bat. That's a similar passage. The extended passages which give the Lord's grouping, regardless of what science falsely codes so-called says. Go through this. Leviticus 11:13 through 20. And they're of the fowls. Well, a fowl isn't, according to everybody, a mammal. A fowl is a bird. That's what it is, a bird. Got eagle, ossifrage, osprey, vulture, raven, owl, nighthawk. Those are birds. Well, they're grouped as fowl in the Bible, F-O-W-L. Deuteronomy 14, 11 through 18. You see that? Of all clean birds ye shall eat, but these are they which ye shall not eat. The eagle, it's a bird, and the ostrich, it's a bird, osprey, etc. And you go all the way down there to the last verse, 18. The bat, it's a bird. You can't get around it. Now, like I said, that is showing that something can be defined in the Bible regardless of what people say about the issue. So therefore, this issue of adultery and fornication being the same thing all throughout the Bible is wrong. Now, you can get to these passages and run them yourself, fornication and adultery, and you'll see that there's a similarity. Committing fornication and committing adultery seem to be the same, but they're not. They're similar, but they're not the same. A cat has many types of cats in the cat group. You got a leopard and a lion and a panther, let's say. Well, a leopard is a panther. They're similar, but they're not the same. Now, I can go on and on about this and try to dig up more examples of what I'm trying to say, but that's it. That'll give you a bit to work on. And I'll wrap it up with this. If a man and a woman being married, and they're saved, let's say they're both saved, and one of them commits fornication, then the other one has a perfect right to dissolve the relationship because they have effectively divorced the other individual by committing fornication. It's flesh joining flesh. That's the issue. Not just sitting there thinking about it, it's actually acting upon the thought. So, therefore, if a man has been called to preach, and he's going along, he's preaching, he's real good, he's doing everything he should as a preacher, and all of a sudden he finds out his wife has committed fornication, then he has a perfect right, he doesn't have to, but he has the perfect right to divorce that woman, because the divorce has already taken place. So to make the divorce official, he has the right to, and if he gets married again, he hasn't sinned, period. And he doesn't lose his calling and election and all that stuff as far as a preacher. He still can preach the gospel. Now there are churches that fall into a group that I think is rather narrow, and that group is a bunch of people that have decided that they will determine what is lawful marriage, divorce, and remarriage, and that is not fair to that individual in certain situations if they don't fall in if they don't fall into the category that would cause them to be out of biblical bounds in order to get remarried and continue on. Because, listen, if, let's say it's the husband and wife, the guy's been called to preach, he's preaching, he's a pastor of a church, and he's supposed to be the husband of one wife, and he is, and she goes out and commits fornication. She's divorced him. He's no longer married to her. Doesn't matter what the court system says about it, although it's in this country, there are property issues and children and so forth and so on that have to be decided in a court. Biblically, she has divorced her husband and married somebody else. Therefore, he's free, according to the Bible, to marry another individual, and he's not married to two women. He can't go back and remarry her, but he's free to marry that other woman, and he's still capable of preaching the gospel in a church behind a pulpit. He's still authorized, and he's still able to be a pastor of that church. It's going to be a tough road to hoe, but he's still capable. And he's biblically, legally able to do so. So that's the end of this particular video or audio or whatever it is you want to call it. And if you have any comments, please view the end and see where my email address is, and you can send me the comments if you want. Thank you. This is Bill Newton, Lions Paw Productions, Concord, North Carolina.